On this episode of RevTalks, we're joined with Jonathan Duarte. How are you doing today?
Good, great to be on the show.
Thank you so much for being here on this episode of RevTalks. Could you give us a high-level overview of GoHire and what you've been building with this company?
Yeah, so this is my third HR tech company, and we build conversational AI for recruiting teams and HR teams. My background is I built one of the first job boards on the internet in '96. Then I built a background screening company, and now in 2016, 10 years ago this year, built the first conversational AI chatbot for recruiting. And we sell to mid-market and enterprise companies around the US, usually companies that are trying to do high volume recruiting. So you think about hospitality, restaurants, hotels, manufacturing, warehouse, logistics, a lot of folks like that.
Wow, that's super
Yeah.
interesting. Now, tell me a little bit about yourself. What kind of got you started with, this whole thing with GoHire and how it started? What's kind of the base framework when it started, if I'm not mistaken, about
Yep.
8 years ago?
Yep. So I was working at the last company I founded, or was part of the founding team of called GoodHire. And one of our clients at the time was a company called Uber that everyone knows about. But in 2014, they were just kind of starting off still, they were in San Francisco and some cities. And we built a API for them to do background checks on drivers. So we got a little piece of that business. And I was at a product meeting one day, and one of my team came in and said, "Hey, you know, have you seen the data, like how many people are coming through that interface with Uber?" I'm like, "No, I have no idea. Like I got another deal I'm working on." Well, it turned out the numbers were huge because they were starting to launch all the drivers through our platform in a certain market. And what I realized was they were starting to hire, and they did hire in 2016, 600,000 drivers in 180 days. And they did it entirely over text messaging. And still nobody talks about it today. And it's the world's largest private hiring event that's ever happened. And nobody talks about it. But I learned about text recruiting and automated conversations, and then decided, hey, I'm going to go build this as another venue.
Wow. Wow. That's really interesting. Now, a question I have for you, Jonathan, is, you've been a founder, you've been a consultant, and you've also been an internal operator inside giant institutions. Which vantage point taught you the most about how technology actually changes organizations?
Uh, it was actually, I was very fortunate 2 years out of, well, even in the first year out of school at UCLA back in 1994, I'd say. I became the financial analyst of the Aspen Skiing Company, living in Aspen, Colorado. I was fortunate there. I learned about the business, the hotel business, the ski resort business, restaurant business. Then I was fortunate enough to start doing implementations in ERP, or enterprise resource planning. And now you wouldn't know about this, Hadi, but there was a company called Gateway 2000, or Gateway old computers that would come in cow boxes. And that company was a competitor to Dell back in the day. And I was fortunate enough to, in their early years, I was working in building their internal ERP systems. So I learned everything about, from the financial side to inventory processing to manufacturing to logistics, customer support, sales, all the infrastructure behind all that. And within 2 years, I left and started my first company.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, when it comes to, I want to talk to you about, one pretty important thing, artificial intelligence. And since that's kind of the main thing that your company or startups have stemmed from in the past.
Mhm.
A lot of people are talking about AI replacing jobs, and you're in the room where it actually happens. Now, what's an honest conversation that leaders aren't having publicly about this situation?
Well, that is a great question, Hattie, because two things are happening. The CEOs are saying, "Hey, we're going to go implement this stuff on their public, on their quarterly calls." But implementing AI is not like dropping in a software product that has a bunch of business rules. As you guys know, as you're building this stuff out, it's not something that comes with the rule book. It doesn't have its own playbook. You've got to build it. And so I think some of the issues that the CIOs and CEOs have had is they've been saying, "Hey, everyone, go implement this stuff, or you're going to get laid off." The problem is, what are you supposed to implement? It's a tool to generate responses, and there's other tools, as you guys know, to do automation that can connect these things together, but you're not replacing existing software. You're just trying to automate manual tasks. And right now, I think once we saw in the beginning of this year, once Claude came in and actually could remember stuff and see memory, now we're starting to see the advantages, but only recently have we seen, well, it's not very cost effective if everyone's using the latest and greatest version. So we can't just, yeah, and we've been saying this in the HR side for years now. You can't just throw it at people and say, go figure it out. You have to, and now they're coming back to it because it's so expensive, because people are just figuring out and saying, well, I'll use the latest tool because that's the fastest one, even though that's not the one they should be using. So there haven't been guardrails, and that guardrails is going into the pockets of the lack of guardrails is what's causing the revenue streams for ChatGPT and OpenAI and Anthropic. But all that's going to get curtailed as companies figure out, hey, we need to do baselines on and who should be running what.
Understood, understood. Now, going more into at least AI readiness, I wrote a little bit about it. So,
Mhm.
what does artificial intelligence readiness actually mean for an HR organization? Like, what separates companies that can absorb this change from ones that get overwhelmed from it?
The biggest thing, and I've written a lot about this. I actually wrote recently launched it 2 weeks ago, a playbook called the Recruiting AI Adoption Playbook, because you hear people out there saying, oh, AI is 80% software, 20% human. And that's complete BS, because what happens is it's workflow process change, and humans are not adapt to doing a lot of changing for a lot of reasons, because it requires training. There's insecurity about, hey, am I doing my job right? Does it do it right? I usually have to do more work because I have to do my job plus learn this new job. So there's a lot of insecurity in that. And people think they're going to get fired for not using it. And then there's people who are going to get fired for if they don't use it right, but they don't know how to use it. So I think the biggest problem now is the human process and the work and mapping out your workforce. And once that's handled, that's the adoption piece. The rest will kind of handle itself. You just got to build the business rules around the tools. And that's how and I coined the term, the AI COEE. And a COE, or Center of Excellence in an enterprise, is often the guidance and, I would say, policy team that makes sure everything's going in the right direction. And if there's issues, how to bring it up to the CEO, and, is that chain of events. And so the COEE that I propose is a center of excellence and execution, such that the CIO and the CHRO, or Chief People Officer, work together and are accountable together to get the training, get the security, in this case, as we talk about tokens and the costs, to get those projects and the use cases defined, and get the training to the workforce so that you can actually execute on essentially what's required is the people piece to get AI implemented within the company.
Our problem that artificial intelligence still hasn't solved yet and may not solve for a long time?
Yeah, it's a really big one, and this will be helpful to any job seekers that are following along, and any business operations person. Is recruiting now is inundated by candidates writing better looking resumes because of AI, which, if you're a job seeker, I would highly recommend doing it, because it's going to make you look better, because it's going to fix your grammar and everything else, right? But be wary of it making statements about you that are not true. Because if you're a, say, director of marketing or a marketing supervisor, and your resume makes you look like the director of marketing, you're going to have a problem, and the company's not going to be very happy. So that's one side, is from the candidate side. And there's also these tools now to allow you to auto apply to 100 jobs overnight. Indeed's actually releasing that as a standard product for people. So the what we call the signal to noise ratio. The number of qualified candidates has stayed the same, but there are more and more candidates that look good for those roles just because AI made their resumes look better. Doesn't mean they're any more qualified. And then you have these auto applications coming through. So you're seeing more candidates, the overall volume's increasing. And that's making it really hard for recruiters to actually respond and find the right candidates. And what we're going to see, and we are seeing now, a bunch of matching tools that would help. Oh, take this job description, match it against, all these candidates, and then get a score. The problem is it's illegal. Is you can't make a decision on behalf of somebody's life, if you will, if you can't justify what the decision was made on. So matching and scoring still needs to be a human function, and it's being litigated in a couple different law cases already. But it's the same things happening in EU and the rest of the world follow, is that we can score, we can do assessments, we can do some of these things, but none of that can be done if someone doesn't understand how it was ranked and can defend that. And that's going to be really
Understood.
hard if you don't own the code.
Hmm. Understood. Wow. Did
Yeah.
not know that. Wow.
Yep.
Now, at least with what work you've done in the past with artificial intelligence and as well as developing job boards, are there any sort of products or software that you are looking to develop in the future?
Well, I think what we're doing, we build the front end, or we call top of funnel, kind of like sales and recruiting are very similar in the nature of a funnel. So just like in sales, you have a top of funnel, how you get interested, you get people engaged, then you educate them, and then then they start doing their research and you want to be part of that. And then ultimately they get into a buying position. Same thing happens with recruiting, but that's going to change a lot. And where we with GoHire sit is we help companies engage candidates quickly using text messaging that can also have a conversation to pre-screen them based on the role they're applying for, making it easier for the recruiters and then at the end to self-schedule an interview if they're qualified. So, and those qualifications are like, if you're a server, are you 13? If you're serving alcohol, are you 21? Like different rules by location, 4 different types of rules. Do you have the right to work? All these different things like that. They're very simple questions, but if you ask people those over text, they're really quick to answer. And ultimately, there's a quote from the Society of Human Resources called SHURM, came out a couple of years ago, and they said 94% of candidates will take the first job offered if the salary meets the candidate's criteria. And so
Hmm.
what that means is the first to reach the candidate is going to win every single time. So it's how quickly you can respond to the candidate, engage them, pre-screen them, interview them, get them in front of the hiring manager, get approval, and get an offer letter to them. And all that stuff has to happen as quickly as possible. And if you don't do it, you're automatically going to lose the best candidates.
Wow. Wow. One of my final questions I have for you, Jonathan, today is, what goals do you have as we move through 2026 and going into 2027?
Yeah, we're moving into the mid-market and enterprise. We're doing a lot of different things, what we call multi-channel messaging, so that candidates, if they're on a career site, if they're on WhatsApp, if they're on SMS or email, however they come into your site there or into your database, there should be ways to automate communications back out to them, regardless of the channel. So we're focused entirely on that multi-channel messaging piece with conversational AI handling the actual conversation so that recruiters can recruit and interview and talk to people while we do the heavy lifting and the computer works 24/7 because the recruiters don't work on the weekend.
Understood. Understood. Thank you so much for your time. Quickly before we go, where can the audience find you on the internet? What's your company's website as well as your LinkedIn?
Yep. So company is gohire.com. And then my LinkedIn, you'll get a kick out of this, Hadi, is LinkedIn.com/in/the best LinkedIn profile.
Really?
Old hat. Yep.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to check that out. But thank you so
Yep.
much, Jonathan, for joining us on RevTalks today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for giving us more insights to what you've been doing and working on.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Abby. Have a great one.